Thank you so much, Jason. Grand Rising, good morning, peace and blessings to everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us on day 2 of our conference. It is such an honor to be with you all once again and to be together again, particularly during these times. I am Sister Anna Muhammad, the Food Access Director with NOFA Mass. I am based here in Pocumtuck Nation, now known as Springfield, Massachusetts, Western Mass. And as Jocelyn mentioned earlier, I have really I'm very grateful to be able to work with the Food Access Program throughout the state now, and to be able to grow that program and to be able to serve and work with communities, both communities of color and any underserved community that does not have access to fresh, healthy food. We look forward to partnering with you in this upcoming year. I am very grateful and have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker today, Ms. Precious Phiri. Precious Phiri is a Zimbabwean facilitator and accredited professional in holistic management. She is also a steering committee member and African coordinator for Regeneration International. Her work involves using the holistic decision-making framework for community organizing and working with rural communities to learn together and reverse poverty and ecological degradation, bringing communal work to global platforms and networking. She has, over the years, committed to working with different partners in Africa and beyond to keep creating opportunities for communities to change the trajectory of their lives, both now and in the future. She continues to learn and grow in many ways in which to get action with communities. Precious has experience working with agro-pastoral and pastoralist communities, implementing holistic management tools for rangeland and crop field regeneration. And she continues to engage in the broader regenerative agriculture movement as a trainer. And so everyone, it gives me great honor to introduce to you Precious Phiri.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Again, I would like to get just a thumbs up to say we hear you or we see you.
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me first of all really appreciate this opportunity that I've been given, and congratulations to all of you for the amazing work that you've been doing in the face of the pandemic, which has to an extent created opportunities for our movement as a whole. And I think I would like to believe that you all agree with me that it's really been an eye-opener that we actually can either win as Team Humanity or sink as Team Humanity. So there is no disconnectivity in this world. We learned so much here through the pandemic, and we're still in the thick of things for many other reasons. But I think we're also seeing a lot of opportunities for the kind of work that we're doing. So I'm going to put myself on a timer because I want to make the most of our time today. One of the things that I would like to excuse, I might use things that are culturally unacceptable in your contexts from an ignorant corner, but please forgive any of those if they happen. And also my accent may be a bit of a challenge, but I'll try and speak as slowly as possible, but also share as extensively as I can. I am now going to put on the screen share. Oh, another thing about me, I really do laugh a lot, but I don't know if I will today. Oh, I just did. Okay, so I'll just share on a PowerPoint with quite a bit of visuals. Okay, let me see if I can. Sorry, I am trying to find, okay, there's the cup. I'm looking for this. It was blocked by another tab. Okay, so I really have been glad to be invited to speak about resiliency in the farming communities. And I realize that most of you are garden farmers, but maybe we can agree that farming is farming. and maybe principles that guide and lead it are the same. And we could be facing different kinds of challenges, which is how life is, because each environment and each place has its uniqueness, and therefore the challenges are unique. But to a certain extent, when you look at the African region and the Asian region, most of our populations are fed by at least 70 to 80% of smallholder farmers. So their role in our regions are beyond valuable and can never be undermined. So today I'm really glad to bring my story, and thank you, Sister Anna, for reading my bio. Okay, so my name is Precious, as has been said, and I have lots of jokes to share around my name, because when I travel, my first time when I was in the US, someone said, so what? So I said, hi, I am Precious. And they were like, of course you are. I'm like, no, that's actually my name. So, so now I do say my name is Precious and Phiri. I work in Zimbabwe, live in Zimbabwe. I was born and bred in a rural setup with my grandmother. I was raised by a grandmother. I lost my dad at an early age. And because of some things that happen on the African continent, usually now things are changing, but back in the day, if your mom had you with another husband, they wouldn't go with you to another marriage. So yes, I was raised by my grandmom, but a mom to my father. Therefore, she was an incredible warrior. It was very difficult. The landscapes have been changing and droughts have been happening for years now, but we see that it's getting worse and worse. But my grandmother never allowed us to be given in marriage at a young age. She was very resilient and strong. And through the generosity of people in the world, I managed to go through education, through a sponsorship by families. So I'm very passionate about education. And so my whole life is a trace of generosity. And one of the things that has inspired me to work in these environmental issues and working with the same people that where I grew up has been mostly the idea that I have learned and seen that it's actually possible to change the story from poverty or impoverished land to abundance. And it faces a lot of challenges, this whole idea, in the situations that we are in. We'll explore as we go. So this is in brief, just like a canvas picture of where I have worked, both with agro-pastoral communities here in the Southern African region and the East African region, with vast lands of the Maasai and the Samburu tribal lands, who keep massive numbers of livestock. And we also work with cropping, which will, I'm sure, help us explore some of the gardening questions. Honestly, I know you are all professionals in this, because if you're hands-on on the ground, we all have stories to share. But thank you for giving me an opportunity to share ours. Okay, so I'm also a smallholder farmer. I love working with the land and have recently recruited my wonderful husband, who is a city man. So there he is working the compost. So our soil is very difficult kind of soil, very sandy. And these are communal spaces. They're not necessarily privately owned. And so they are run by the state and the government. And being a communal smallholder farmer, you do face situations where the government says, so come and get fertilizer. So it's an influence from the big agricultural companies, the kinds of trades that happen in pursuit of green revolution agendas. So they do offer communities fertilizers. And in recent years, which is an absolute shock for me as a person who grew up in the rural areas, they offer herbicides and things to spray weeds. We grew up taking off weeds using our hands. And if the work was too much, we had a thing called amalima. I will try and explain what that is. That is inviting your neighbors. You do like a home brewed beer. You invite your neighbors and you cook all your nice homemade food, and then they come all together at once and help you manage weeds in your field. as a social arrangement, no payments, nothing. And so having herbicides, pesticides, you find that it's now forcing smallholder farmers into monocultures. When I first heard it, I was like, what happened to weeding? You know, but this is being really rolled out by big governmental bodies in our communities. And so this small plot, I am really hoping that it will share and show that you can still be resilient and use a small plot and use intensive ways of farming, like partner planting, or using different kinds of crops. Like here, I have 10 different kinds of crops. There's sunflower, there's all the butternuts, cowpeas, pigeon peas, millet, all the small grains, sorghum, maize, okra, we have things called groundnuts here and roundnuts, some of our traditional foods. So we all put it in one plot so that no soil is left uncovered, because the soils are very loose and the nutrition is very, very low. And at first, of course, the challenges are how to build up a composting, like a composting capital, if we were to put it that way. At first, it's very difficult, but then we have small stocks like goats, chickens that we've put in these fields so that they can camp there and input also their manure, and then the compost will be helping as the rains progress. You may lose some of the nutrition, and then so we are also learning, but we're seeing a lot of differences. The rains were very late. Our crop in this plot is way ahead of many farmers. And so I'm just hoping that this will be so much inspiration for others who are following. And on a personal space, which has also impacted my work in the broader sense. So I suddenly became a mom after hoping for like 14 years. And so this is like a big thing for me and my husband, our family, but also in the sense that now more than ever, I think for me, legacy is very important. What kind of story am I drawing? What kind of modeling am I doing for my daughter and for all those who are watching me and my friends? So this is not only like displaying art. There is no expertise in agriculture and regeneration and land building. There is only lots of learning and inspiration and excitement around the possibilities. So that is my daughter. She is a firecracker, like really full of life, but also challenges me in a unique way. Okay, so we're just going to dive into today's business. So I will be sharing mostly the actual work and some of the concepts that have helped guide me in my work. I think I started really hands-on on this work from 2005. And like has been said, I'm a big student of Alan Savory. I learned under holistic management, but from then you grow from there. But it has really influenced how I make decisions, how I view the world, and understanding as a person who grew up in the rural spaces and then exposure to the cities, I can now weigh and see where we are slowly missing it as the human race. Okay, so I will talk about the context of the communities where I work, and generally the people in Africa on a generalized space, but also from a personal experience of working and dealing with these communities on a daily. So the state of agriculture in itself, we are seeing, like the story that I just told you, massive advancement of industrialized form of farming, which to us is totally strange and new, but it's been pushed in so much that it is now the new normal. And when you bring regeneration, the idea that we actually need to build soils, and there's a way of building soils outside synthetics and all the chemicals and all the disadvantages that they bear, and communities can attest year after year, you need a lot more fertilizers, a lot more pesticides, and there's a lot more outbreaks of insects and things that are actually traumatizing our environments, and rangelands are failing. The most important thing as a part of our lives, which is our livestock, where we store our wealth, you don't have enough forage for those livestock. So these communities, even those ones that are working in regeneration, agroecology, permaculture, they are faced with amazing challenges at policy level. And then there's also a difficult task of just the landscape in itself. It's been degrading so fast, bringing lots of social instabilities. There's obviously the climate instabilities, which is sometimes late rainfall, sometimes too early rainfalls. And when the rainfalls eventually come, you can't even go out to plant because it's a lot at once. And by the time it goes, it will go for a longer time. And so, you know, how to juggle the balls in terms of how climate is affecting communities. So this is what also the farmers are facing. And then we have a lot of, because we're in such a difficult landscape in terms of the financial crisis and degradation, and then poverty that then leads to that, and some social instabilities. We also have a lot of NGOs, which mean very well, they have charitable works, but most of the times the aid comes even when it's not needed, and eventually has created a sense of dependency from the communities. And therefore, when you're working to change the to bring transformation, it's a big block to actually talk through. And therefore, as a facilitator, we work with a lot of conversation and dialogue and just reminding ourselves of who we are. And then about 2/3 of the African continent is degraded. We need smallholder farmers on a larger scale, like I said before, and policies continue to reward, give fertilizers for free. And so the farmer will be like, yeah, why not take, it's free, and why would I want to be busy being so hands-on? But regenerative and soil building agriculture, I have learned, may be tough for the first 2 years. It needs you a lot. But when your soil gets better, your work also and stress levels really reduce, because you don't farm one type of crop. What if it fails? You have lots of leverage to play around with in the community. But these challenges remain opportunities. You know, like I said, that I think the language in this work really has to change, because we look at our challenges as opportunities to actually change the story. And then we look at this, the big one that we always talk about, climate change. Climate change is both a challenge, and at the same time, you wonder, is it really the main cause of the problems, or there's other things that have actually led to climate change? And in holistic management, and generally, when you look at the worldview, and unfortunately, I am not your scientific girl, but I have a small understanding of what goes on here. So we are really grateful for all the figures that we have of how the climate is warming up. And if we don't take an action, we will be the Don't Look Up movie happening in the real sense. I know there's a movie that came out recently, which really spoke deeply to my life. So climate change in itself is not a cause of the challenges that we face. It is a symptom, I believe, that is speaking to us of the decisions that we keep making when we are doing our agricultural activities. So agriculture in this sense is the production of food, fiber, and anything that is agricultural on the lands, waters, and the dry lands of the earth. So these decisions that our policymakers and us as farmers keep making, we are contributing to heating up the climate. And so we know that there are bigger contributors that have contributed to the greenhouse gases, and agriculture keeps being evolved into this mechanistic approach, yet we are managing a living system using mechanistic approaches. Because here's the thing, the way you manage, the way you treat a wristwatch is different from the way you treat your garden. A wristwatch, you can have an expert who knows how to fix a wristwatch when it's broken down. But something that you manage, when it breaks down, you cannot just fix it like that, because it never breaks down. The lands never break down. They keep what we call self-organizing. So a wristwatch is complicated. If you do not know what to do with it, you definitely will not know what to do with it until an expert comes. So in environment, there is no expertism, because When you've implemented a practice on the land, it will give you feedback. It will show you whether you're producing what you said you wanted to produce or not. So that we call a complex system. Not complicated, but complex because it needs your participation, working together with that thing that you're managing so that you produce the outcomes that you're looking for. But from time to time, you have to keep looking out. Are these the outcomes that I wanted? If it's unintended, where could we have gone wrong? So you plan, you implement, you monitor. When you need to change, you control. So it's a continuous cycle of lessons, and we get better each and every year while we are building these ecosystems that we're looking for. And I think it's the same with running a family or your body, for example. You know the kinds of exercises or food that doesn't work with your body. So that's what we manage. We manage what we did not make, but we can fix what we make. I don't know if that is clear. And in this same topic, when we look at the climate crisis across the world, wealthy countries, I'm sad to submit because I'm also talking to my US sisters and brothers, they have really let us down, especially in the poorer nations, on their climate commitment. It's sort of treated as if, no, we have a planet B, we are fine. And they are not willing to channel some of the funds to help the initiatives that are actually changing lives. But here in this continent, as you can see from these pictures, people are suffering from raging wildfires, hurricanes, famine-induced droughts, and the consequences of these climate instabilities are here, and they're here now. You can have lots of rain and still suffer drought, and then another year you don't have any rainfall at all. So it's really, it's scary, but also exciting because we have the answer. I love this quote by Alan Savory, who said, ultimately, the wealth that can sustain any community, economy, or nation is derived from the photosynthetic processes, which is green plants growing on regenerating soils. So to a certain extent, we can fool ourselves and think that there is wealth in the corals, in the industries. All that will eventually let us down, because we will have the billions maybe, but then we will not have where to thrive in the true sense of thriving. So when we build the essence of what supports human life, that's what Alan is saying. And then when I work with these communities and when we work in this work, and I'm sure where you are as well, the work is to improve the broader landscape, really, maybe even beyond a small field or beyond a small garden. Because when you improve your garden, you are plugging into improving the ecosystem of the area that you live in. So if your neighbor does the same, and then your connections, it now becomes a whole big environment that has been impacted by really thoughtful processes and farming activities. So we do these actions to improve ecosystem processes. We also want to strengthen the economic drivers of each community. What they farm and what they grow can be the screen. Yeah,
No, I can't hear, because is there a way to put the earphones on?
But are you going to stop working?
I'll have to stop. Yeah, I can stop.
You want to, you don't have to.
No, I guess I should be able to.
We can hear you.
Okay, are we good?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. If you lose me, please do tell me. And then we also work to thrive, to create thriving and stable communities, socially and culturally. Like, for example, the idea of communities working together is being taken away by industrious activities of agriculture. So therefore, I think working on landscapes or a garden or in your organization, for example, you are managing complexity, and therefore you cannot focus on one part. We usually say, when you look at water, how do you manage hydrogen separated from the oxygen? You cannot. You manage it as a whole. And I think that's the transformative mindset that we are looking for. Can we look at our landscapes and learn from them, and then apply the tools that apply in that moment. Okay. So going to the next slide. Sorry if I look like I'm a little slow. There's also things that are flashing if people want to join. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one. I'm sure you have spent a lot of time sticking and talking about the principles of regenerative agriculture, or principles that build a stable and resilient farm at whatever scale. I think they are the same. So I'm just going to leave them there. I'm not going to read so that we continue sharing. So I'm going to give us a little bit of a teaser on how we use the holistic management decision-making framework to actually make decisions, whether as a family, as a community, or a person who's just interested in working in this sphere of regeneration or agroecology or wherever, or whatever you're doing. So holistic management, most people say, when you say holistic management, people think, oh, no, she's talking about cattle. You know, she's going to tell us about cattle, but that's not what it is. It's bigger than tools. It is a framework of making decisions. And yes, there are tools, because when Alan Savory worked on holistic management, he was working in the rangelands of Africa. And for him, the theme that was spreading desertification on the African landscapes was management of livestock and wildlife. That's what caused degradation. And then the tool of livestock became a key tool in being involved in regenerating landscapes. And the principles of regeneration also really allude to that I think a healthy system should have all forms of life, including living beings like animals or poultry or whatever that is. And so it doesn't prescribe tools. And in your own environment, you will then use this decision-making framework to choose what tools are relevant for your farm. So there are 4 key insights in managing nature. So nature functions in whole. So we cannot manipulate parts. And then the question that a farmer or a manager can have, how can I contribute to make every part of my place thrive? So there's no winning of one and then everything else suffering, because it has to go together. This is a complex system. And then brittleness, which is the spread of precipitation across the year. I know you have lots of moisture in your area. We have very little moisture, so we are brittle. But then the idea here is we're not necessarily worried about brittleness, but the idea is I need to better understand my ecological context. And then that way I will know what relevant tools do I apply. And then when we look at grazing, which is one of the biggest tools that we use here, time is more important than numbers. Therefore, we're saying the amount of time that a plant is exposed to a feeding animal is more important than how many animals are actually there. So one horse can overgraze a pasture, and you can bring 10 for 2 days and bring them out, and that pasture can thrive. I don't know if this makes sense, but this is some of the work that I've been doing. And then you're like, your question is, what are those conducive conditions that can cause my ecosystem to thrive, whether you're managing an organization or whatever? So these are generalized questions. And then we have predator-prey relationships. Livestock, if properly managed, can heal the land. Please take note of our management role in helping our gardens, our fields, our families to thrive. Then you say, how do I recognize the relationships that exist in this ecosystem so that I can make the most of them and then cause my environment to thrive? And then I shared with you a few pictures of how we have learned from the wild, large herbivores, how they are pushed and moved by lions, hyenas, and then they walk in huge numbers. And because they are being hunted, they are jittery, they stomp the ground and poop and urinate. And then because you can't stay around your poop and urine for a long time, they keep moving. And then when they have moved, what remains behind is a landscape that recovers. So we as people are looking to nature for lessons, and then we use the animals that are accessible to us, and we do the same. So this is in essence the work that we're doing. But because I work with communal spaces, it is not easy. And there's lots of dialoguing for people to actually start taking these actions. But the lessons are actually clear and there. And then as a farmer, as a manager of a garden, as a manager of an organization, it's important to understand the area that you're working with. And I'll say why this has been important, especially in my work and when I read at the world outside. There's lots of copy and paste activities that happen. So you have the word best practices of the world. So if composting is the best practice, for example, how do I do it in 35,000 hectares of land? How am I going to be able to spread compost in the mountains, in the valleys? So the idea is understand what you're managing. What sort of land is available to you? Who are the decision makers in this land? Because in this work, you're working economic, ecological, and social. So you do not want to jeopardize the relations with government, with authorities and communities. So this helps you know your place intimately, and then you will know what needs to be done. And you also have to know what resources are there as farmers. We find that most farmers, especially if you look at the cases of India, farmers are stressed because they are in debt and they keep borrowing and putting inputs in these fields that are not profitable at all. But what equipment is available to you? What source of money is available to you? And do you agree with the money, the source of that money? You can have funders coming to a poor community in Africa and they want to fund, but do we agree with that source? Is it supporting something that will regenerate our now and the future? Maybe not. It could be just a guilty group of very wealthy people who want to feel better, and then they load you with money and then they're like, yeah, we've done it. Let's go and continue business as usual. So these are such sensitive questions that we need to ask ourselves. And then you create what we call a holistic context, which is basically a vision of values of where you talk about what you want to see. And when you get into the field as a farmer, usually what has led to escalation of industrial agriculture is farmers want bumper harvest, and at what cost? And the things that you implement, are they going to give you a view of what you've described in your holistic context? You describe what you want now. Stability can be one of them, and we all want the same thing: peace, abundance. And there's lots of scarcity mentality, both in the poor and richer communities. The problem is the same. But we have this dialogue now that's going on saying, what is abundance in essence? Abundance is not amassing for myself only, but abundance also includes generosity. So that's how we are unpacking abundance. So when I'm farming, I must also be planting back into my soil. And then from there, you also describe the future, because we don't want to thrive for now only, but we also have the future generations in mind. But then when you look at the future, you're actually saying, so what will the environment look like? And then there's an important part of our behavior, which is our society and cultural norms. Who are we as a people so that we also sustain this quality of life that we've described? I hope this helps. I'm being as brief as possible because time is so jealous. And then for resiliency, I also share that we do what we call ecological literacy with the communities, where we learn the ecosystem processes and actually talk about them. But we always say the land communicates. The state of the land is telling a story, and communities will share what story they see. So your backyard is telling a story. The woods just behind your house are telling a story. And what is that story? How's the solar energy flow? Is the photosynthesis effective? Do you have enough plants so that you have solar panels that will convert the sun into food for the soil? And then the water cycle, which helps us maximize the capturing of soil carbon, and then the capacity of the soil to actually be an underground water storage for all the water that we need to use. And then the soil mineral cycle, is there biological activity in this soil, and why and how. And then we have something that we call succession or community dynamics. The more diverse plant life there is, or animal life and insect, a mixture of them, we call that ecosystem complex and it's healthy. And then if you have, it's the same, like we use the example of if in the community there was just one age group of people, do you call that a healthy community population? So it's the same. We look at our landscapes in the same way. And then we go into making decisions. In decision making, and why this is very important, it's because I think we've been trained and have evolved into making decisions towards goals and objectives. My goal is to have 10 tons of maize, and this is what I will do. I want 10 tons, nothing else. But in that achieving 10 tons, you've killed the soil microbiology, you've killed most of the life, and yes, you have your 10 tons. There's a chance that next year you will not make the 10 tons. But what if you spread the risk and grew small grains and larger grains and pumpkins, and then you have 10 tons, but of a variety of things. And then there's this little story here. I actually saw this on Facebook, and I just copied it and took it as it is, because for me, it was such a nice example for how we make decisions towards achieving an objective or a goal. So there's a person who said, help, I just saw a rat in my coop area. First time ever, what do I do? And then there's amazing people who are like, come and get some of my cats. Yeah. And then one says, they need a kitty. And are these guys wrong? We don't know. Is there something wrong with a cat? No, maybe not. But what happens if I bring a cat into someone's chicken run? What happens? Anyone wants to scream any answer that they know and think they know?
Well, the cat may eat the chickens.
The cat may eat the chickens. So yeah, so now we are thinking, okay, maybe the question to ask ourselves is, why are the rats found in the chicken coop? Could there be a hole in the chicken run? Could there be grains that are stored outside that are attracting rats? Things like that. So you analyze. I also don't have the answer to this, and no one should, because the farmer has to ask themselves the questions to find what caused the rats to be there. I hope this makes sense. And we use this a lot, even with communities. One time, if a community wanted to grow, to keep bees, and there's nothing wrong. We all love honey. And in our meetings, my role is to question. So can I ask, so like in the rural areas, we used to have bees like literally around homes. So now you're like, so where's the nearest place to find a natural traditional beehive inside tree curves? I'm like, well, that'll be about 7 to 10 kilometers. I don't know what's that in miles, maybe 5 miles from where the villagers are. And I'm like, so if we bring bees here, why did they run away from us to such a faraway place? And then you start unpacking how the ways of agriculture are affecting the life of bees. Because if we have pesticides, they'll come and drink our water and then they will die. So we don't have an infrastructure right now to support a healthy beekeeping enterprise, for example. So these really are such helpful dialogues, but they are also very difficult. Remember, we're working with a group of people that has been used to saying, what do you want? They're like, we want a borehole. But then if you want a borehole, where is the water coming from? Have you made an allowance for your land to capture water so that you can then drill a borehole? Those questions are not there. So when I work with communities, this picture that I'm showing you, we do the same thing, doing the holistic context and getting to know your place, but I use lots of visuals so that any group of people, even if we don't speak the same language, I facilitated in the Samburu communities. I understood none of what they were saying. It's a very patriarchal society, led, strong men, but we all want the same thing at the end of the day. When you introduce yourself, you share that you're also from a brave tribe of people who love the land and their cattle, and you're accepted just by that. And we drew these trees, what we call a problem tree, a solution tree, and then from that we convert it into a holistic context. And so this thing here on the right, which is like a written big board, it's their vision for the community. And all actions that they will do are to satisfy or see this vision come to pass. So this vision sort of is now the context where that helps you make your decisions. And these decisions, you have a few filtering questions. For example, if we brought the cat for our neighbor to fix the rat problem, will this fix the root cause of the problem? Now we are asking ourselves. And will this action help or harm what we manage? What if it eats the chickens? And will this action help or harm our relationships? I might be angry. Why did you give me your cat? You just wanted me to feed your cat from my chickens, or not? Will this action help or harm our livelihoods? Of course, this is our business, so maybe it's now dying. And what do we feel about this action? So now it's an issue of feeling. Is it right? Is it wrong? Maybe do we need to think a little bit about it more? So we do this as well with the communities, which is why I say it's not an easy journey, but I really, really have seen that sticking to the process really helps. And there are no shortcuts when you want to regenerate land, economy, and the people. So here are our tools. Now we're just going to talk about the actual actions after lots of dialogue and agreeing that we're working really based on a partnership. We are friends who want to change the story of our lives. And we use holistic plant grazing and animal impact, improved cropping. There's lots and things keep coming, but this is just the two tools that I wanted to share. On grazing, communities actually do their own maps and they plot out so that they understand. This is like understanding the whole you are managing. And we sketch our movements for the grazing plants in this map. Honestly, there's no way you can manage a complex thing such as a landscape or land or an office without putting things down. It's so complex. You know, when there's a line of cars moving, you can count cars. And maybe when we add bikes, you can say, okay, one car, one bike. But then if we add like people walking, and then we add, I don't know what else, motorcycles and whatnot, you can't count 6 variables at once. So this chart here helps us look at the variables and manage the complexities of the landscapes that we manage. And a few important things in the grazing, this is so important because different lands project recoveries differently. So when you've brought your animals onto your landscape, you move them at separate times. So in the growing season, you want to grow grass. Remember, we don't say rainy season or dry season. We talk growing and non-growing, but in your sense, maybe slow growing season. So the behavior of the plants is different when the conditions are conducive for fast growth and whatnot. So you move your animals quicker so that you make the most of the growing opportunities to take care of you in the non-growing season. And some of the plants that we've seen here, when they are overgrazed, they start to run away. Remember that word, self-organizing. The grass has been hit too much, it starts to spread so that the animals cannot reach it with their teeth. So that's what happens. And so what happens in your garden, maybe when you've watered too much, the plants start to reject your water, or the plants start to show you that we've actually lost all the nutrients. They turn yellow, they turn purple, things like that. So this is the same notion. And then when we look at it on a broader sense, when we work with communities, it's important to make decisions that honor the uniqueness of each community. So implementation time and what sort of practices, farming practices are done in each region is dependent on the uniqueness of that place. And then networks and partnerships allow for learning and exchange lessons to happen. And then have a co-creative kind of approach. When you work with communities, they have so much knowledge. I grew up in the rural areas. I remember lots. So can you imagine how much benefit it would have if we really put an importance on farmer-based research where farmers also inform the sort of decisions that we're going to take. And then let's have those bottom-up strategies or initiatives, which is what I sensed today in your meeting when you're talking about how you're also influencing policy. We have to show them, showcase our work, and also hold them accountable, especially if the political environment allows. And then let's have easily accessible and simple materials. We need to really hone in onto our language and simplify it so that even a consumer can be influenced, and then they will know what sort of food to buy and to look for. And then I also added here, strengthening of economic drivers, because the reason why communities or farmers tend to alter and resonate to degenerative practices is because they feel like they're hopeless and they have no way of continuously taking care of their families. And I think our programs and our work must really highlight the idea that we can depend on farming again. And here's the potential of this work. We progressively improve whole ecosystems. Please take note of the word progressive. Each year is different, but definitely you tend to see change. So from scarcity to abundance. And then we have an opportunity here to create context-specific designs that really identify and resemble the essence of each place. There is no one size fits all in these solutions. The principles are the same, but then the approach and the design may be different. And then we say we work to create just reciprocal relationships between the people and also between the people and their surroundings. And then continual growth, which really shows us that there is no dead place on this planet Earth. All the soil is waiting for are the conducive, what do you call it? The English has run away, but like conducive situations for the seeds to start germinating, for grass to start coming back. And then the idea is we are moving from, again, scarcity mentality of I'm fixing this for myself and my children to we are doing this for ourselves, our children, and the land that we so love. And here are some of the potentials expressed. This is the community that I worked in Samburu. No lie, this was 2019. And, you know, like I come from a dry region myself. But you know, when you come from a dry region and then you get to another dry region and you're like, wow, this is really dry. But principles never lie, and commitment will always bring results. And I think the attitude when we're working on our lands and soils or influencing or working and helping a group of people, we need to bring 100%, lots of positivity and excitement about what's possible. And look, this was 2020 already. They started to grow grass, and I get pictures from the guys on the ground, which is such an honor, and I get to share this story continuously. And then I also work with communities to actually grow food. And this is, we use livestock, like what I said last time. We actually crawl it in the crop fields, depending on the soil. But on a general scale, in each place, 7 to 10 days at a time, or if your soils are richer and darker, 5 days should work. And depending also on the spacing that you gave between the animals. And let's see this, this picture here. You have, it's sandy soils. Oh, this thing is saying I should stop. So I've done my time, but I'll be done just now. So here, this is sandy soil, which had looked lifeless. But after putting that crawl, this is the kind of soil that you have. And this here is a traditional storage of all the grain that's been harvested while it's still on the cob. It's yet to be put on the threshing floor and then processed to actually be packed in bags or what we call granaries. So this also helps us resolve conflict because sometimes there's wildlife here, but they can't jump into this crawl. And then it's also giving communities seed and food sovereignty. People can now do seed saving. And that is it from me. I hope this was what you really hoped for. And I'm so grateful for your time and everything. So I will stop here. I think we have about 15 minutes to dive into questions. I really stuck in with the time. Thank you.
Very well done
Wow.
with your timer. Oh, go for it, Kristen Jen.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jason.
Please.
um, I am just here in just such immense gratitude right now. I'm like holding space for this beautiful arrangement of words and accolades and gratitude that's coming through on the chat. And I know it's a lot to take in right now, Precious. So we'll make sure that you get a copy of the chat so that you can look at all this later. And thank you for being willing to take some questions at this time as well. There are some questions that have come through the chat. Feel free. I think we have, Jason, we can go about 10 minutes over. Is that what it looks like? So we can go till 12:40. If people are up for it, we would love to continue this conversation a bit with you. The first question that came through here is, can Precious give us an idea of how much migration of farmers and people have occurred in Zimbabwe and in Africa as a result of desertification, climate crisis? We see so much in the news about migration into Europe. I'm just interested in how many people this impacts.
Okay. Oh, that's such an incredible question. And because in presentations like this, you can't really exhaust everything. And I'll give an example of just Zimbabwe alone to a neighboring African country, because one, when the land is not productive, and of course there are other additional challenges which are like politically inclined and economic challenges. But from Zimbabwe alone to South Africa, 3 million Zimbabweans live in South Africa, like just the next door country. And then when you look at then climate refugees, we have, I can't put it in percentages, but like I hope the South African example can show you, we have a lot of brain drain, even of professionals. Our nurses are in the USA, they are in the UK. And here you can die of a disease that's not supposed to kill you, but because we always have lots of staff loss. So I can never really quantify, but all I can say is it's amazing. And then even if you look at just movement from communal spaces to cities, because the lands are not productive and people are resorting to going to find jobs, whatever that job may look like, which destabilizes families as well. So, because now the community is mostly full of older women and older men and children, because younger, energetic men and women are out in the cities finding jobs, and some of them are out of the country. I hope that, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. There are some other questions coming through the chat, but I see Ellen, fine, you have your hand raised. So you're welcome to say your question.
Hi, Precious. It's so exciting to be able to talk to you all the way in Zimbabwe to what we think of as Massachusetts land here. So my question is, you know, you hear a lot about this agricultural aid when the US government gives aid, and for me that usually means, you know, the multinational pesticide and chemical fertilizer companies are giving the aid. So is there ever a time when it's not that, when it's, you know, people like Alan Saver, people like NOFA, that you can point to in your experience? And also, you know, how do we in this country respond to people who tell us what a great thing it is to give agricultural aid in that sense, to quote unquote increase yields and improve farming? If you have some responses from your mouth that we can pass on to tell people that, you know, maybe this isn't the solution and this is a better solution.
Thank you. So maybe the first question, your voice was very low. I didn't hear, but I heard the second one.
Ellen, would you be willing to repeat your question for Precious?
I don't remember the exact order. So it was kind of like when the US gives agricultural aid, usually it's GMOs and high pesticide and chemical fertilizer is what we're aiding. And so I'm just kind of wondering if you have some really good examples of regenerative aid that comes through, where it's really an allyship, not just here's the product, now we're going to bankrupt you. But also, what can our response be to people who tell us how important it is to give quote unquote food or agricultural aid to developing countries? And what can our response be, like literally from your mouth, so that we can say, hey, we spoke to a farmer in Zimbabwe who teaches other farmers, who said, this is what we really need to be doing instead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So I guess the first set of your question, I would say I'm part of a network, I think 2 networks, one in Southern Africa, which is called the Seed and Knowledge Initiative. And then there's one that cuts across Africa that is influencing food systems, which is called the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. Honestly, and in this panel of people, there's us who are working directly with farmers, and then there's guys who knock on policy doors. We have a big body here in Africa called the African Union. It's, of course, our presidents, we can talk to them, but half the time they're like, yes, this is very good. And then I don't know what happens when they go to the offices. A committee is formed, then they're like, yeah, there's this committee that is going to help you. But then we keep seeing them repeating programs that are really impoverishing us. And so, but they are citizens that are arising. There are farmer networks that are really arising. As a matter of fact, there's like hundreds of thousands of farmers in Africa that are deeply diving into agroecology. And let's take note that it's such a high road because it seems easier to get all the inputs for free. But then can you imagine if the ones that are bringing the inputs, the American citizens, if they understood what is at stake, even socially, for this group of these people? Yes, you're thinking you're giving agricultural aid, but like I gave an example in the beginning, a simple practice of people working together, they will not be meeting anymore. And then an issue of once, before my maize is actually ripe, I can eat cowpeas, I can eat melons, I can eat small pumpkins while I'm waiting for the crop of maize to be ripe. I can no longer intercrop because the herbicide will kill all the seeds of cowpeas and things. And now I'm a monocropper, which was never so. So honestly, I think above the environmental repercussions, the social burden and the social destruction of how this is changing the culture of food is very high. So what if we respected the culture of food in these countries? And instead, how about if we create a climate funding approach, looking for incredible or credible organizations and networks that are working to improve and change what Green Revolution has been pushing. And then we get the funds to the actual people working on the ground. You can have the Global Environmental Fund saying there is 4 billion that has been released to go to farmers in Africa. And the farmers have never even smelled a dollar. It all ends there in those big consortiums. You have like a big consortium of 5 big NGOs who have $175 million. And then they have these big cars, double cabs, and they're just living the soft life, but then the farmers who are actually doing the work don't get anything. So there's a lot that can be corrected.
Thank you. I'm just sitting with so much of what you're sharing. It's so powerful. Thank you. Let's see. I'm going to look at this next question of how are preserving biodiversity of wildlife and grazing domesticated animals balanced?
Nice. Thank you so much. I am so glad this question came. I actually have I have two different examples of how biodiversity or wildlife is being intermanaged. Do you remember that chart that I showed you for grazing? It takes care of all those things that some places actually have wildlife, and some wildlife species like the wildebeest, for example, carries, you call them vectors, when something carries a certain disease. So the wildebeest carry a disease of abortion for cattle. So you know where they are at this time. So some farmers that I've worked with, so we'll say, so what are the problems in this area at this time? Okay, the challenges are, we have buffalo here, and buffalo carries a kind of tick that causes heart water disease for cattle. So in the peak of the rainy season, instead of conflicting with the buffalo, we do not go to the buffalo areas where they are grazing. We go to the highlands when the buffaloes are down in the lowlands. So there's a lot of skill at community to just coexist with wildlife. Unfortunately, in situations like some of the Zimbabwean national parks, where people have really been separated from the existence of wildlife, there's like a low-lying enmity between wildlife and the people, because people perceive lions as animals that are coming to just eat our cattle and goats. But if you go and train a Maasai in Maasai land of Kenya, they live with the lions and the giraffe and the buffaloes. So you plan around that we may find buffaloes here, and we have to be with our livestock all the time, so that lions, when they see a person, they will not pounce on the animal. So there's a lot of conversation to create back again the good relationship between wildlife and livestock. And the settings between Maasai and agro-pastoral communities are different.
Great. Let's see, we have Esther Noel. You may ask your question.
Good. Thank you for your time, and thank you for all the knowledge you have spread, not only in Zimbabwe, but I'm from Haiti and I live here in the US. And I know last year we have faced a really downpour of rain, so we lost all our crops. I don't know if the same thing does happen to Zimbabwe. I would like to know, all last year crop was beneficial to you, or you have also lost from last year because of global warming and everything that's going on? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think for us, the hardest year where global warming really became real to most of the farmers was the year 2018. In the eastern highlands of the country, there was flooding. Actually, let me find that photo so that I show you. It will be very quick. I think it's this one. This was in 2018. Is that photo? Oh, what happened? Sorry. Okay. Did you see that photo though? Okay, let me do this. Where are you? Yes, this one. This was in the Eastern Highlands where there was Cyclone Idai. We in our region, this is a farmer that I got into their field and I captured this same season. We were all supposed to have equal rainfalls, or at least they always have more and we have lesser. But we were bone dry. There was massive crop failure. And then here, there was massive crop failure from flooding. So yes, we have had those experiences. And then this year alone, the rains came in very late, and then we had downpours that swept across people's fields, and now they are gone again. So we don't know when next they'll be coming. So these realities are like an everyday thing now. So I think, yeah, that's what I could say about that.
Maybe that photo actually just illuminated one of these questions. How do you rehabilitate sandy desert type soil so quickly? What grass or plant seeds work best?
Okay, so in my case, I've never worked with planting grasses, because what I have learned about our soils is lands can be low-lying and look bare for years, especially if they were once fertile and well. Seeds remain in the soils. They just need you to introduce a management that will activate that recovery for it to start thriving again. So in a grassland, for example, in my community, the first thing that you will see is, for example, after a good management of livestock being introduced to the land, a chipping happening to the hard-kept soils, the first thing that you will see is what you call weeds or annual grasses that livestock can use, but also, even if it's not used, remains to cover the soil a little bit. As the conditions improve, you start to get what we call perennial grasses, those ones that have roots that are rooted in the soil and they can span the whole time. But this will take a bit of time. But then at first you may start a trailing sign of the ones with thin seeds because the soil isn't quite yet conducive, but you are starting to stabilize root system or establish root system. And then when the soil is now really great, you start to have rounded seeds and deeper stems. And then this can then continue. It's like, honestly, a succession where you see that, okay, I'm starting to heal. And we have never had to introduce seeds in any plot of land. Like I said, here we think of a community has like 3,000 hectares, each community, each village. And how do you seed 3,000 hectares? It's better to use some of the tools that are accessible to them. But I'm sure if you looked in your area, you would have your native grasses that you can start to introduce alongside living organisms, whatever that looks like, be it a goat or chicken.
Thank you for that reminder. Jan, Martin, you had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. The picture that you brought up, I just tried to comment while you had that picture brought up, with the cornfield pictured alongside the field that was very dry, void of any vegetation. And the third frame showed a flood. Is this typical of the field that you're trying to place under cultivation that you're trying to rehabilitate, or is this a particularly bad year? Was that the photo a particularly bad year?
This photo, this one.
The one that you just brought up a few minutes ago, there were 3 frames on the screen. One
So
was,
next door, that is our neighbor, the one behind there.
okay.
Yeah, and a farmer can have a bad year every year because the soils are so sandy and very, very difficult. They're like this, so needs lots of thoughtfulness on the soil and not just plowing using. Some people introduce tractors and the soil is already so vulnerable.
Okay.
So, yeah, so definitely the soils are really difficult. It's not a lie, and I cannot even romanticize it. It's very difficult.
I have no doubt. My next question kind of leads right into that, and that's what kind of cattle are common there, because they don't look like the same kind of cows we have in our fields around here.
No, we usually have nguni and a mixed bag of everything. But we definitely do not recommend what we call Brahmans, the big framed ones, because the environments are very harsh. But over time, those who know how to breed have been introducing one breed called Boran, which they cross with our local small frames, so that if farmers decide to sell for meat, they can have a bigger frame and get a reasonable fee. So like you are sort of improving again your economic earners in the community.
Are you able to get milk from them as well? Milk?
Are we able to?
Milk? Do you milk?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, milk, and then we culture the milk, and then some of it is eaten as fresh cream, some of it you get the whey, the children drink it, and some of it you drink as fresh milk in the morning.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. Precious, thank you for being willing to go over with us for a little bit. There's just a flood of questions and comments that continue to come in. So I apologize if we can't get to all of them. This question here is, how do you approach situations where you may hear very different ideas in one community of how to move forward? For example, some may want herbicides and pesticides.
Yes. Oh, definitely. I mean, so sometimes when you come to work with communities, they have their own ideas and they can say, we want artificial insemination for our cows because we're looking for better breeds. But I think what I've really valued over my journey, and I have lots of colleagues who are very supportive when we work and talk with communities, don't really have to say, yeah, sure, whatever you want, because you also have to define what you stand for as a facilitator in this work. And there is no pressure at all to perform, or no pressure at all to stick with one community because you're fearing that if you say no, then you have a failed project. It's not a failure. It's not what you stand for at that time. And in dialoguing, you can be open because we work on a partnership basis, that this is who I am, this is what I stand for, and this is my vision for working with you. I have my own holistic context about the kind of work and what I would love to see when I have worked with the community. And that helps you clarify things that you obviously identify with and that you don't. And gentleness, patience, and kindness when you're showing them why this action may not necessarily be the best for them. So you talk it off, you talk it out, and then I think there are many options of even, okay, what if we started a fund to buy a better bull, and then we put it in our heads that we are managing. There are many options, but definitely communities want industrial agriculture because that's what has been advertised as successful farming.
Thank you. I think this will be a good time to end this section. So Jason, you can take over.
Yes, thank you so much, Precious, very much for your time and your presentation and for going over and answering some more questions with us. There is, as Jen mentioned, much appreciation in the chat and a lot of affection in the chat that is being shown toward you and your presentation. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you everyone for your attendance and for enjoying the conference. I hope that you're staying with us for the roundtables that are happening this afternoon. You can find links in the program book. And if you haven't registered for the whole conference, you can register for those individually. I want to let everyone know also I dropped links in the chat for an evaluation and also again the native land acknowledgement map, as well as the auction and the vendor marketplace. Also want to let you know that if you wish to save the chat to your computer, if you navigate down to where you type in your chat message, there are 3 little dots to the right of where you type in your message. If you click on those 3 little dots, it will show a menu with an option to save the chat to your computer. So if you wish to do that, you can do that. And I will remain here for a few minutes and let you do that. And if there's final questions for me, but we can say goodbye to Precious. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful day. Precious, thank you so much. And best of luck this year and this season.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Precious. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you, Precious. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, interpreters. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Great job, interpreters.